Recently, I shared an interview I did with Vito Muñoz, who was able to drop his glucose levels significantly in a matter of a few months through a low-carb diet and intermittent fasting. However, Vito's doctor wasn't entirely satisfied with that due to the fact that his cholesterol shot up significantly. So we talked about that, and on today's edition of Beat Diabetes, I had Vito share his experience with high cholesterol and his decision to get a coronary artery calcium test, known as a CAC test. Well, we have Vito Muñoz again on our Beat Diabetes program to talk about the issue of LDL and the low-carb/keto diet. Once again, welcome, Vito.
Thank you. Thank you much.
I get quite a few questions and frustrated comments from people who say, Dennis, I went keto, my blood sugar is looking so much better. I no longer have liver issues, and they go on and on. My triglycerides are down, but there's a but coming, right? And then they say, but my LDL has doubled, or my LDL is off the charts, and you have had that yourself. And so I wanted you to kind of share your story. You are an IT guy. You are into data. And at some point, you knew that your LDL had increased dramatically. Tell us just how much it increased and what your initial reaction was to that.
Over the years, my cholesterol's been right on the border of about 200, which is okay-ish, unless you're diabetic. And then the doctor says, yeah, no, that's too high. You can't have that, so you need a statin. So when I quit the statin, and I had been on low carb and keto for probably 4 months, I doubled. I went over 400. My LDL was, I want to say 280, 380 on its own. But thanks to YouTube and any number of places, I found that there's the LDL by itself is 6 or 7 or 8 different sizes of LDLs, and there's that big fluffy LDL, and then there's the sugared LDL and the oxidative stress LDL, and every time they get damaged, they shrink. And as I came to understand, your total LDL with the big fluffy receptor on your liver, the softball size particle hits it and it's taken up. But as they shrink to baseball size, you no longer grasp them. And those things end up circulating in your system and causing havoc. So four and change is, I think, where I was at most recently.
Okay, so you had extremely high LDL, and I'm sure your doctor is shouting at you and all of that. But you had heard enough to know it's not exactly a straightforward issue. The higher the LDL, the higher the chance that you're going to drop dead of a heart attack. What was your reaction to having such high LDL?
Well, you're correct. My doctor and my wife, conventional wisdom, the old school mentality. Oh my goodness, this has a direct relation to mortality. So I started doing more reading and more understanding and more watching and looking at medical studies. I came to realize through a couple of folks who I can take in small doses. They're Bart K. He puts a study out, or he reviews a study that's basically millions of cohorts, millions of people in the study, and it shows that if you artificially lower your LDL, you have a higher risk of mortality. And certain indigenous tribes or people who live off of whale fat, they have extremely high cholesterol, but have very little risk of mortality. So in my brain, I'm like, okay, something's broken, and I'm very disenchanted. There's the word with the medical and the pharmaceutical industry. So I came to basically say, right or wrong, whether this is the truth or not, I'm going to have to do this on my own for a little bit. And my doctor at least partially agreed, but he's like, hey, we have to be sure, dude, you're a heart attack risk. You're absolutely a heart attack risk. So have you ever considered a cardiac calcium score? And I'm like, okay, what's this? He goes, it's yet another procedure. He hands me a piece of paper. It's $99. You go down off the street and they'll give you a score. And I'm like, okay, is that accurate? At $99, really? And he goes, well, okay, yeah, it's good enough, but there's another way. And of course, I'm like, my ears perked up. Well, what is it? He goes, well, there's a CT scan with contrast, high res, and medicine to slow your heart down. And I'm like, okay, I'm in. What's next? Why do they slow the heart down? He goes, well, your blood vessels are so big. And when the heart expands, when the heart expands, they slow it down with EKG monitors watching. So the computer system knows it's about to collapse because the contraction won't slow down. The refills open slow, the contractions fast. And in order to see all of the plumbing, all of the calcium and the clog, you want to get the best possible picture because we got to know, like, I'm in, let's do it. My copay is not met, but I'll do it. So we went for a super high-tech calcium, cardiac calcium test a couple days ago.
Yeah. So this is basically going to check and see how blocked your arteries are, which is another way of saying how soon can you expect a heart attack.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
what is the rank? The score is going to go from what, 0 to 100?
So 0 to 100 at my age is actually healthy.
Okay.
Above 100 is you're starting to get low to moderate risk. If you start getting into the 5, 6, 700, if I remember correctly, you're major risk. And again, yeah, because it was with contrast, they're looking at all the vessels around the heart specifically. Well, the net was, I have a cardiac calcium score of 0, and I thought it was a typo because if we rewind, hi, I'm Vito, I'm a bad type 2 patient. For close to 20 years, I've eaten what I wanted. I have a calcium score of 0 and a cholesterol sitting at 400. Now, I know genetics, I know the Heavenly Father, I know any number of reasons why that it is what it is. But it was an emotional read when I read the email, because I then pulled down the real cardiac radiology report. Now, I'm not scot-free. The lower aorta has a minuscule lining of cholesterol, but my score is 0. So
Yeah, 0. I would spell that PERFECT. Perfect. I mean, you don't get much better, and you're not, some teenager either.
No, I'm in my mid-50s, and the next email from my doctor really kind of made me chuckle because he did say, "Do not resume your statin," and I was like, "Well, I'm glad we finally agree because I wasn't planning on it, but thank you now for coming to my side of the table."
That is so awesome. There is a doctor by the name of Brett Scherer. He has the Diet Doctor YouTube channel, and he talks a lot about calcium scores, about high LDL and what he calls hyper responders. And it seems like the verdict is not out, but I mean, you did the smartest thing, right? You're being told you are in serious danger. You take the test, find out you're just almost perfect. Apparently, LDL doesn't tell the whole story, at least all the time. Certainly not in your case.
No, I agree. Everybody has to do their own research. There are plenty of PhDs, MDs, holistics, pastors on YouTube that you can watch, and it's just a matter of you've got to put, I don't even know the right words, earmuffs, earplugs. You've got to tone out conventional wisdom. You've got to tone out the last 20 years of the pharmaceutical industry. You've got to pull the data yourself, pull the research yourself. Again, part K, small doses. But he constantly comes back to that study that has millions of people in it and talks about LDL. I think it's Dr. Ekberg that I watched, the holistic out of Atlanta, talking about the size of the big fluffy LDL and the oxygenated and the glucified, the sugared. And when you start to understand what's happening, then you have a way to start testing where you're at. Now, all of that said, your standard doctor is going to go, here's your lipid test. You have an LDL, you have an HDL, you have a triglyceride. I told him I need the big test. And he's like, what are you talking about, Vito? I'm like, I want the one that gives me LDL, LDL small, particle counts, VLDL. I think it's 6 or 7 different things. Baseline, because I had no baseline.
Yeah.
My LDL small was 50%. I was a little bit freaking out. It's up there. It was also my baseline. I didn't know what's next. About 30, 40 days later, we got the next LDL enhanced lipid test. My LDL went up, my total cholesterol went up, my small LDLs went to 25%. They did actually reduce. It wasn't just because I doubled the LDL otherwise, but the count was smaller. So I was on the right track, keeping the sugar in line. I was fixing the LDL small problem, which I'll continue to do, right? Because we still don't want LDL small. It is that spackle that patches up your arteries if they need it. I need to go back to the doctor. I need to ask him. I was like, okay, my cardiac calcium score is 0. Does that mean, the ones in my neck are 0? I don't think so, but I don't know. But with my heart at a 0, I'm a whole lot happier and less worried about any naysayer. Oh my goodness, you're going to have a heart attack. I'm going to eat my bacon and eggs and I'm going to enjoy it.
A coronary artery calcium test is a pretty fair predictor of the possibility of future heart attacks, and a score of 0 is about as close as you can get to a 0 chance of a heart attack in the next 10 years. It is a far better predictor of future heart problems than your total cholesterol or even your LDL cholesterol. Now, to be fair, there was someone recently who left a comment under one of my videos who had been eating keto carnivore for the last 3 years. In 2021, he had a CAC test and his score was 108. Now, 2 years later, he had another CAC test and his score was 226, so he had doubled his score. 226 is not a terrible score for a man in his 50s, as this man was, but he was certainly moving the wrong direction in 2 years' time. He shared his future plans with these words: so I'm going low-fat, complex carbs, fish, skinless chicken breasts, lean protein with daily exercise. He advises us be very careful eating all this saturated fat. Some people absolutely can't handle it. On the other hand, Dr. Eric Berg, who's been eating a keto, low-carb diet for many years, had a CAC test, and he shared in one of his YouTube videos that his score was 0. Now, that's outstanding for a man who, like Vito, is in his 50s. Most of the medical experts I read and watch seem to feel that inflammation is the greatest cause of plaque formation in the arteries, and inflammation is the inevitable result of a high-carb, high-sugar diet. However, it is possible that there are other factors, and there may be some cases where, like that man who left the comment under one of my videos, one simply doesn't do too well with a super high-fat diet. Now, that doesn't mean you need to go out and stuff yourself with carbs and sugars, to be sure, but you may need to explore moving from a keto diet, which insists that you eat at least 70% fat, to a low-carb diet where you do not make artificial attempts to ingest as much fat as you can every day. It may mean switching from a meal of fatty meat loaded with butter and a couple of eggs to a meal of roasted chicken and a salad. If you wonder where you are in the formation of plaque in your heart arteries, consider asking your doctor to write you an order for a lab test for a CAC score. If you score too high, then you may need to consider modifying your diet. But keep in mind that if you've been eating a standard diet and stuffing yourself with carbs and sugars, and then in the last year or so you started eating a keto or low-carb diet, you cannot justly blame the new diet. That plaque formation probably developed in all those years before cutting the carbs. The only way you can truly blame your diet is if you have a CAC test which shows you're in good shape, and then several years later after changing your diet, you have another test which shows that you have a much worse score. I'd love to hear from you. If you have had CAC scores in the past, how are you doing? What kind of scores did you have? This would be especially valuable coming from people that have been eating keto or low carb for years, and they had a test before eating that way and then another test recently that can demonstrate the effects of their diet. Ultimately, as I've said many times, you are the one responsible for your diet and your health. And the coronary artery calcium test looks like it's proving to be an important tool in determining how healthy your diet is, and if there's any need to consider tweaking your diet in order to achieve maximum heart health. If you've recently been diagnosed with diabetes and you've just discovered this channel, let me recommend that you go to our Uploads page, which will give you access to every diabetic video we've posted since we began. As you work your way through all our videos, I believe you'll find the help you need. A link to our Uploads page is in the description.